I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So our next speaker is Brian. Brian has spent the past decade teaching history and English in his native Denmark's upper secondary school sector, winning the Teacher of the Year award in 2017. Yay, we love teachers and we love teachers winning awards. Outside the classroom, Brian is always involved in multiple projects, often focusing on the 3 T's, Templars, Tolkien, and teaching, of course, or a combination of those topics. Today's paper may include all 3 of them. So Brian, you're up.
Thank you so much, Shama. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. And then screen sharing time. Everything okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. So Shama, thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you to the organizers. Everything here has been absolutely grand and so many fascinating papers to listen to. I'm sorry I missed the first half of the conference. I've been on a study trip with a class of teenagers in Dublin. So I'll just get my head in the game, dive off the stage, and let's see what happens, because we're going to take a look at how we can remember the Knights Templar in power metal. So yesterday, on the 25th of February, Swedish power metal giants Hammerfall released their 12th studio album called Hammer of Dawn. Earlier the same week, the band posted what you can see on the left on social media, in which they referred to their fans as faithful Templars of Steel. This, of course, is nothing new, as Hammerfall have consistently made Templar references since before this, as you can see on the right, and even before, well before this, the Templars, the most famous of the Christian military orders, once again was catapulted into mainstream popular culture in the mid-noughties, and their fans embraced those references.
And let me interrupt. Your PowerPoint isn't moving. It's still on the first slide.
It's still on the first.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can't see some Hammerfall images
you need
right
to
now?
put it in presentation mode. Bottom right, little slideshow icon.
Okay, I thought I did that actually.
Now it's good.
Now it's good. Now I can see the Hammerfall images.
Yes.
It's still not in presentation mode. It's still.
Okay, this is weird because it looks like it's in presentation mode with me. I'm really sorry about this.
I have your time paused in case you're worried, so don't panic.
Okay, thanks. I'll just see what I can do here.
Okay, so the bottom right, the very bottom right of the screen, there is an icon that looks like a projector.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I tried to do it manually. How is this working for you?
Still not.
Okay. You know, I'm just going to try. This is okay. I stopped sharing my screen. I'm going to try rebooting screen sharing. Okay, what do you see now?
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, because I just skipped ahead a bit. Okay, so these are the Hammerfall images. Good?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I coded encrypting machines for the military before I became a teacher, and I can't make a PowerPoint work. I'm sorry about that. That's the deal of being a teacher. Okay, so this is just the Hammerfall images you can see right here. And like I said, Hammerfall have made Templar references for quite a long time. But the past decade has also seen appropriation of the memory of the Templars far beyond secret societies in crime novels and rousing choruses in metal, most disturbingly in connection with protest and terrorist attacks from the extreme right. Here we have Templars present at the storming of the Capitol, 6th of January last year. And of course, we have the terrorist attacks by Norwegian honor-bearing Breivik and the Christchurch mosque shooter in New Zealand. In that context, this paper asks how and why the Templars find their way into power metal, especially the realm of Hammerfall, which role they play, how fans perceive that role, and bands react to that perception, and where do we draw the line between the entertaining and the potentially dangerous. Finally, I'll make an attempt to explain everything by using theoretical terms from the fields of history, anthropology, and pedagogy. When the Knights Templar, or reception of them, is included in recent times, certain elements seem to occur very frequently, especially when they are portrayed in fiction. These include the red cross on a white background, even if that is historically incorrect on banners and shields, secrecy, appearing more as a group than individuals, a tendency to be headstrong and aggressive in battle, and so on. These character traits fit rather nicely with the fast-paced and epic traits of power metal, in which the lyrics are often based on history, literature, mythology, etc., and focus on standing together as one. And of course, if we include the gender aspect, the Templars were cisgender white men. In their fictional role since the 1980s, the Templars mostly fall into two categories: the secret society and the ultimate Christian knight, both of which could be portrayed as a positive or a negative one, depending on the agenda of the author. In the case of Hammerfall, it should probably not be a surprise that the Templars are celebrated as the ultimate knights. It should be noted there's a dangerous tendency on the far right of fusing these two roles into something more and far more sinister. But why did Hammerfall get into the Templars in the first place? In the early 1990s, the city of Gothenburg in Sweden was a veritable hotbed of heavy metal bands trying to break through. Inevitably, most of these fell by the wayside, but a handful eventually managed to reach a broader audience. One of these is Hammerfall, a project originally conceived in 1992 by a young guitarist and songwriter named Oskar Dronjak. Dronjak immediately set out to create an image for his new band and wrote their first song, Steel Meets Steel. Since this song will prove instrumental in the identity of the band and their fans, it deserves to be shown in full right here. And I'm sorry, I'll just skip reading it out loud to you. Obviously, this song refers to the events of the First Crusade, the call to arms in the beginning, following the renowned speech by Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont, and furthermore the Christian conquest of Jerusalem. And the song does include the correct years, thus showing that some rudimentary research must have been conducted, although primary sources do not seem to have been included. Of course, the interesting bit here is the mentioning of the Templars, who appeared to be the speakers of the song and accordingly explained the highly pro-Christian stance presented here. Stating that the Templars took part in the First Crusade is clearly historically incorrect, seeing as how the order was not founded for another 2 decades. Nevertheless, the link between the First Crusade and the formation of the Knights Templar is undeniable, and it's interesting to note how Steel Meets Steel ends in the present day with a claim that the Templars will still exist. Yet here the Templars are not so much a secret society as role models. Honor, pride, and courage are all classic chivalric virtues, making the historical Templars here seem to be closer to the ideal of knighthood than to any sort of conspiracies. Here the encounter between Hammerfall and the Templars could have ended. But including the Templars appears to have been an instantly popular gimmick. Perhaps the theme of crusaders and power highly appealed to the target audience. Perhaps it just made the band stand out from the rest by choosing to focus on something very, very specific. References to other staples of popular culture, such as zombies and samurais, have definitely not been successful for Hammerfall, just the Templars. Whatever the reason, ever since Steel Meets Steel from Glory to the Brave, Hammerfall have consistently included the word Templar at least once on every album, always in heavier anthems, never in their softer ballads about love. After Glory to the Brave came Legacy of Kings, which included 2 songs referring to the Templars. One of these was already quoted as the title of this slide and emphasizes the connection between history and the world of today, while stressing that the Templars have returned. This theme is repeated in the final song of the album, Stronger Than All. Here it is stated how the past, quote, the past and the present unites in us all. We stand up for our beliefs. The way of the Templars is here once again. Forever they will be free, end quote. By this point, the role of the Templars in the Hammerfall universe was almost cemented. Stalwart defenders of freedom and honor, and opponents of unspecified heathens and infidels who tried to suppress these Templar ideals. In addition, the Templars are always mentioned in the plural. Here they are a community, and no individuals distinguish themselves in any way, be it positive or negative. Coincidentally, this mirrors the portrayal of the Templars in medieval fiction, but was probably done in order to make it easier for a collected audience to identify with the lyrics. Although the Templars were an organization strictly for men and the vast majority of Hammerfall fans are male, it should be pointed out that a handful of songs do refer to both sisters and brothers in a departure from the norm. Over the course of the following albums and live videos, Hammerfall have, as noted, kept referring to Templars in some way. Since the theme has hardly changed over the years, an analysis of every Templar song, at least 14 and 12 albums exist, plus several other references, would become too tedious and monotonous. However, a few examples deserve to be highlighted, and I'll just leave the quotes right there for your general enjoyment. From the historian's point of view, this Hammerfall Templar is an interesting creature too. The band's first song, including Templars, was rooted in the First Crusade. Since then, the portrayals of the Templars have drifted from historical reality and turned into self-contained symbols. For instance, if the link to history had been maintained, it would be natural to include the trial of the Templars in connection with the songs about being against the oppressive system and fighting for your freedom. Instead, the Templars now appear in lines such as fighting for the right to be, Templars of the first degree, or even Templars, bang your heads and unite. A purely symbolic expression with no counterpart in the history of the actual order, whose rules don't say anything about headbanging. Apparently, the term Templars won so much favor with the target audience that it made more sense to apply to the fans than retain the references to a more remote history. And speaking of their fans, some of them stick out in rather unpleasant ways. Enter the extremists. Despite their Templar obsession, Hammerfall appear in surprisingly few memes and other references to Deus Vult, etc., but a few cases may be found. One example is a YouTube upload of the song Templars of Steel, maybe found on the playlist, where one comment received more than 100 likes by simply writing Deus Vult in all caps, while a user named the Templar Knight of Justice stated Deus Vult Ave Maria less successfully. The user's profile does look quite serious, and the username also sounds rather similar to Breivik's idea about refounding the Templars led by the so-called Knights Justiciar. Another example is how Hammerfall's song Warriors of Faith may be found on a Deus Vult playlist on Spotify. At the top of that page is an anti-Islam meme based on the First Crusade, looking like this. Hammerfall may not have had far-right intentions in their songs, but appropriating them in that direction does seem easy. The Spotify playlist in question relies heavily on Hammerfall's fellow Swedish power metalers from Sabaton. Sabaton are known for almost solely making songs about war and play with identities to an even larger extent than many other bands because they change the specific point of view from one song to the next to match the different sides. The band have a strong online following who sometimes edit homemade music videos. One of these is quite relevant here since it is based on the song The Last Stand from the album of the same name from 2016, which also included songs about popular right-wing historical topics such as the 1683 Ottoman siege of Vienna and the 300 Spartans, already present on our playlist. The video in question consists of clips from the films Kingdom of Heaven and Arn the Knight Templar, singling out scenes showing Crusaders and Templars cutting down Muslims, even though both films preach tolerance. User response to the video was uniformly positive, and there's a slight content warning. I'm going to show and read out loud some fairly ugly YouTube comments in a moment here. So like I said, user response to the video was uniformly positive. Fans noted lines such as "in the service of heaven, for the grace, for the might of our Lord," and an overall glorification of Christian martyrdom. A call for a new crusade, followed by a Deus Vult comment, was echoed by the same words numerous times. There is one problem with this, or probably several, but the lyrics of the song are not about the Crusades or the Templars, but tell the story of the Swiss Guards' defense of the Pope during the 1527 sack of Rome, which was carried out by other Christians. Clearly, a widespread desire to force a modern-day view of the Crusades into a place where it does not belong exists. The video was watched almost 20 million times before the creator's channel was deleted by the platform for violation of their rules, but has since been uploaded once more. Although the already mentioned reference to a new crusade may be seen as a joke, and that it's just fun to join in a Deus Vult chorus, the comments below the revived video include the following statements. You must understand that the people who own YouTube and moderators aren't Europeans and have a hate to Europeans. Those are the globalists, deaf to multiculturalism, crushed neo-Marxism to the final victory, and tells about our governments. BLM is now big hit, and vegetarians and being gay. All of these are obviously very common talking points on the far right and echo sentiments found in the manifestos of Breivik and the Christchurch mosque shooter, not to mention several far-right conspiracy theories such as QAnon and the Great Replacement. These thoughts are often preoccupied with the idea of taking control and assuming power from the enemy's so-called weak men, which sadly overlaps with the central element of empowerment, so typical for power metal. Now, are metal bands aware of this appropriation of their songs? Let's look at some counter-narratives. To return, Hammerfall's popularity has reached beyond the metal subcultures, which may be seen by them lending the song Hearts on Fire to the national women's curling team for the 2006 Winter Olympics, complete with an accompanying music video showing a curling match against the band. Thus, in a somewhat bizarre twist, the curling team lip-sync lines such as "Heathens ruled above us all," and "Now the time is here. I see the Templars everywhere. The freedom call is growing near," in the ice rig while interacting with the band. Now, was this a deliberate attempt to invoke the lost power of the Templars in order to smite teams from unbelieving nations? No. According to Dronjak, the song was chosen because it was the band's greatest hit at that point and remains so to this day, not because of the warrior-oriented lyrics. These lyrics are even watered down in the context of the humorous video, which begins with the band looking fairly intimidating and clearly scaring the women they're supposed to have a curling match against. Of course, the band proceeds to meet complete goofballs of themselves on the ice, losing, being completely defeated, looking dejected on the sidelines, whereas the women, victorious, proceed to put on Hammerfall's clothes and instruments to finish the song, clearly having the time of their lives. The curling video is somewhat emblematic of the difficulties encountered when analyzing Hammerfall. The bellicose songs and the numerous references to infidels and crusaders would appear to be uncompromising comments on multicultural Sweden and a call to arms against foreigners, would they not? Apparently not, since no trace of the band having affiliations with right-wing movements have been found. To return to the curling video, having their clothes and instruments taken and their identities assumed by a group of women would be impossible to reconcile with the view of gender roles found among Western traditionalists, men's rights activists, and other groups associated with the current alt-right. The music video does precede those movements mainly online, but shows Hammerfall's readiness not to take themselves too seriously. To return to The Last Stand, Sabaton are definitely aware of what happens online and have referred to the idea that the song is about the Crusades as a misunderstanding. The band also tends to take the edge off their lyrics through their often self-deprecating manner on the stage and in interviews, a potent example being when lead singer Joachim Brodin referred to the band as, quote, the village people in camel pants, unquote. In addition, Sabaton have actually spoken out and protested when far-right groups and parties have used their music in political campaigns, and the band's decision to release a video for the, at the time, 6-year-old song Night Witches in 2020 as a celebration of women overcoming male prejudice in the military and being unfairly forgotten is difficult not to see as a way to distance themselves from some of the groups mentioned above. Nevertheless, and in spite of the intention of the musicians, metal is still appropriated by extremists, as seen in the comments above, and used as a vehicle in their agenda. How can we explain that theoretically? A term I use from history is something I borrowed from French historian Pierre Nora, namely the site of memory. The main elements of studying something at the site of memory is Nora's dichotomy between history and memory. History is factual, whereas memory is emotional and doesn't have to be in agreement with historical facts. Sites of memory are also enclosed, self-referential, but can also always be given new meanings, and remembering is always a deliberate action. In this way, it is not unnatural for several contradictory meanings to be put into the same historical phenomenon. Yet, we should remember that memories form narratives. Narratives shape culture, and culture creates behavior, if I may rip off Master Yoda a bit right here. To fully understand Hammerfall's application of the Templars, it is necessary to examine the conventions of the genre. At least as far back as the documentary Metal: A Headbanger's Journey, just mentioned by Sean, studies unsurprisingly show that many youngsters are drawn to the more moderate parts of heavy metal because it's considered a space where outsiders are welcome and values such as camaraderie and the willingness to stand up for your beliefs prevail. The music becomes a break from reality that lasts for the duration of the song, the album, or the concert. Once it's over, you return to everyday life feeling a little more empowered, much in the same manner as Swedish anthropologist Lorten Gustafsson discovered while examining the annual Middle Ages Week in Visby. There, completely ordinary citizens dressed up, played with identities, and acted in ways they would normally not. In those situations, hostility is restricted to being theoretical and only spoken of within the frames of the alternative reality created by the setting, or, in this case, the music. Fans of Hammerfall and other metal bands play with identities too. And this is where the Templars enter. For a limited period of time, it is fun and perhaps even self-assuring to imagine being a Templar of steel, the very embodiment of at least a modern interpretation of the concept of chivalry. In this light, the lyrics of Hammerfall make more sense and become a way for the fans to show confidence in their own identity. The concept of playing with identities in power metal is much akin to studies of role-playing games, a genre that has also been in the limelight and accused of glorifying violence. Similarly, research in this field has shown that references to violence are strictly regulated and only make sense within their own universe. But this explanation is insufficient. According to Gustafsson, creating such enchanted zones where different rules apply requires a play chronotome, a specific place, at best physically defined, and time where this takes place, Buckingham Village, for instance. As she puts it, you cannot live in an enchanted zone. If someone does not follow the unspoken rules and keeps the assumed identity after the game is supposed to end, it becomes an echo chamber, reinforcing ideas in a continuous and possibly radicalizing loop. Being in an enchanted zone is empowering. Overstaying your welcome there is destructive and potentially dangerous. An anecdote about that leads us back to the German band Feuerswanz, which Sean just mentioned. When I tried to add a humorous reaction to their cover of Manowar's anthem, Warriors of the World United, I received this rather angry reply from the user Metal Crusader 666, a wonderfully cliched and contradictory name in itself. Clearly, this person has caught neither the humorous nor the self-deprecating elements and appears to have a hard time leaving each other. So it's actually a Hammerfall logo that is the profile picture of that user. This double-edged sword, so 2 minutes?
Yes.
Excellent, wonderful. This double-edged sword between empowerment and potential radicalization is something that metal culture seems to share with other fandoms, including fantasy, science fiction, superhero stories, and role-playing. We do not need to look any further than the comment section under any post about the upcoming The Lord of the Rings of Power series to see that. And now to my final point here and question is when communicating history works. In 1990, the studies of Danish history teacher and ministry consultant Sten Larsen, who was asking why history is so boring, so you can just quote him, Julia, concluded that teaching or communicating history requires it to walk on two legs, the intellectual and the emotional one. Now, there are many classes here who will probably say, but Brian, isn't this just logos and pathos? And yes, it is. But reframing it into communicating history is a really handy tool to think of teaching as a two-legged creature that would easily fall over if one is forgotten. As seen by some of the comments above and our own experiences, metal is indeed emotional. And these two legs might be a way to have more people engaged with unknown topics, as was discussed yesterday, and something I've witnessed in my classes when metal songs are invoked. Like other fandoms, metal based on a reception of the past is capable of bringing fans together and providing them with entertainment and a sense of belonging, but also of reinforcing or developing extremist ideas amongst a small but vocal minority. Whether and how this should lead to more of a reaction from various bands and communities is something that warrants further discussion. And speaking as a teacher, I just always hope that we can make as many people as possible learn to react with, well, it's a bit more complicated than that when they encounter headstrong claims, for instance, about appropriations of the past. This interdisciplinary approach of metal studies may just be one of the keys to this. So let's keep this party going, people. Thank you, and also for dealing with my technological issues.
Thank you, Brian, for that very great presentation. Every time I hear you talk, I can see why you're an award-winning teacher. You explain really complicated things very clearly, show sides of a question and show its complicatedness without shying away from the difficulty, in this case with the Templars. And it's, as you know, it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart and a really important subject that we need to tackle. And I'm glad that you're one of the people dealing with it. I'm waiting for some questions to come in as people kind of absorb your, while they come in, I'm wondering, you kind of, I think, touched on it, but I just want to maybe tease out a little bit. Can Templars as a subject ever be a neutral subject in, let's say, metal, that people can just say, yeah, or is it always going to immediately connect to, very problematic themes? Like, just to be an extremist, like nobody could say, I'm just gonna, write songs about the Nazis and it's neutral, right? So
it's something I'm trying to deal with right now. I'm working with Rory McClellan, who does some really amazing work on far right appropriation of Templars right now. I think the attention from Hammerfall, especially to begin with, I didn't have time to touch on why did the Hammerfall find the Templars in the first place, and the best thing I can find is Ivanhoe. There are several Ivanhoe references in some of their songs, and the Ivanhoe movie from 1982 has been shown on Swedish television every year for Christmas or New Year's since it was released. So I think in that way, the Hammerfall Templar is so detached from historical reality that it practically becomes neutral. And you can also see that more people associate a Sabaton song that is not about the Crusades with the Templars than than Hammerfall songs. If when I look through Spotify playlists that goes towards Deus Vult, there's more Sabaton than there's Hammerfall, and Sabaton have not made a direct Templar song yet. So I think there is a neutral element to it. What we're doing right now is we're also digging up. There's a primary source about fairly famous about how some Templars stopped some newly arrived Crusaders from attacking local Muslims in the Levant. So there is more of a nuanced view of the Templars that can be presented, but yeah, we are fairly obviously losing the fight against extremists who appropriate the Templars, especially with some of the manifestos out there.
Nobody writes metal about the Hospitallers, do they?
I haven't seen much, but they're not that appropriated, partially because they still exist. I have stumbled upon some Twitter users who use the Hospitaller cross, and they're far right, so it definitely exists. But I think the name is just too confusing. That what are they? I'm not going to write metal songs about the emergency room or something like that.
We have some more time, I think, for a couple more questions. Does anybody have? I could talk to Brian forever, but I want to leave room for other people.
I'll jump in here. Something that I thought that I said in the chat, but also just wanted to remark upon how you ended the presentation, Brian, which was brilliant, is discussing the pedagogical potential of not only your work and looking at this bottom material that you're looking at, but just kind of what we do in general, you know, as metalheads, as well as people who study and teach history and texts. And how does this translate to some sort of classroom exercise? So for instance, you know, I don't foist my metal stuff on my students often, but you know, when I do teach a Greek Civ class, we have a day on Alexander the Great, and we play the Iron Maiden song, and then we analyze the lyrics, and we talk about, you know, we critically analyze it, and in all the ways you can expect. And I'm just wondering, have you used metal in the classroom?
I usually.
Could you give some examples of like some activities that you've done with students that we could possibly take inspiration from?
Yeah, I do that in both history and English. And remember, I teach at approximately, but I don't have the time to explain the Danish educational system to you, but I teach at pretty much the high school level. I usually say that my students listen to metal whether they like to or not, and quite often students in neighboring classrooms also listen to metal. In terms of history, I think it was one of the first things I ever did as a teacher. I did a theme on the Crusades, and I had this really slow class, not sorry, but in terms of activity, and I couldn't really get them to react. So one day I just decided, you know, I'm gonna kick down the door, almost quite literally, and then I put on Gravediggers, Knights of the Cross, and they just sat there looking completely shocked. And then somebody said, "What's this song called?" And I said, "Listen to the lyrics." And they caught a few bits and took that down. And then exactly we used it to train critical analysis. And this is one of the things where metal songs are really great because, well, they're fairly short and there's a chorus that is usually quite, so teaching students to look for bias in that is usually a wonderful exercise. I actually have one of my history classes that is almost completely consisting of girls. They shout out, apart from the song Night Witches as our battle cry in the beginning of every lesson. I've also done something about gender in English, playing an Arch Enemy song with no video and then just asking the students to draw the singer, and they never get close to what Alyssa looks like. So yeah, though, I think basically just, of course, I'm also that privileged that I work in an educational system where there's hardly any curriculum. I'm supposed to teach them specific skills, and I can definitely do that through memes and metal and everything else. So yeah, just throwing in metal songs and training very, very basic elements such as, is it neutral or is it biased? How does it reflect its context? And I have a very basic model for this, just consisting of 3 areas, saying, is the past used as a cautionary tale or as a role model? And then the arrows point down to the word why in all caps. And I can see that actually works quite well for the students.
Thank you. We don't have time for much more, but I want to leave this. I think it's a very provoking question from your presentation. I think it's an important one for all of us. I think it relates to a lot of the themes that have come up, not just in this panel, but throughout the conference. It's from Jacqueline Young. And she asks, and I want to open this to all of us to think as scholars and metalheads and all of that, historians, medievalists, classicists. With so much of the ugly alt-right reception of medieval materials and classical coming from non-scholarly sources, movies, novels, websites, what is the role of academic historians and other scholars, cultural scholars? To what extent do and can our interventions matter, right? Can we get into arguments on YouTube comments and kind of say, wait a second, that's not what the Templars were doing. So to what extent beyond our kind of conference? Anyway, so I'm just going to leave this as a really important question for us to keep thinking about. Thank you for that question, Jacqueline. And I'm going to end it here. Thank you to all our presenters and hand it over back to our conference organizers to tell us what's coming next.